Your network is your net worth. The Swiss Association of MBAs, founded in 2004, has one aim: to connect, inspire, and grow MBA graduates and students from the leading universities and link them to renowned business leaders around the globe. We are growing fast. With currently over 4,000 members, we offer fantastic networking opportunities through high-quality on-site and online events, conferences with top-notch speakers, educational content on sustainability, digitalization, entrepreneurship, education, diversity and inclusion, finance and investment opportunities. You are an entrepreneur with a groundbreaking idea? Connect with our investment club. We offer much more than just money. For all MBA alumni and students with a link to Switzerland, join our growing community of international business leaders and start growing your network. Check out www.swissmbas.com today. Swiss Association of MBAs, empowering international leaders.
So welcome everybody. I'm very happy to have you all here for our D&I Summit. What is SAMBA? So you have seen a video, I explained a bit. We are live since 2004. So like today, the agenda is we have Juet, then later I will introduce her. So she's our D&I Council lead. We have Fazli from UNHCR, apologize, then Heidi ABB, then from Zurich Insurance, Katja, then Günther, head leader of PwC, former boss, and then Matthias, expert of D&I questions, and Anna as our main moderator. So I will just give a very quick overview what is SAMBA. So we don't only focus on D&I, but this is really something that is very important for me also. That's why. And we want to contribute here a lot. So we have these kind of like focus topics. So digital, we do a lot of tech events. Last 2 weeks, we had the Metaverse Summit, and in August, Digital Leaders Summit. Then Korea is the next one we want to do about leadership and career, so also in transformation, also how the merger in Credit Suisse, UBS is happening, what this has an implication. Then entrepreneurship, we do a lot of startup pitch events. Then diversity, equity, inclusion. So here we want to really drive and do a lot. Also, our events should be more inclusive. Also, we try to always have international speakers, also more female, also age-wise and from race and so on. This is really key. And then sustainability, we do the Sustainable Leaders Conference, and finance, we have a monthly investment roundtables. And then for all these topics, we have council leads. And today we have then Juet, who represent, we have I think more than 80 people joining online. So we created also like our own the event solution, so like a little metaverse, and this is how it looks for you, not really, but please explore later on. And now I would like to hand over to Juet, and also Andrea is here, both from our D&I Council. An applause for their great support. Yeah.
Really glad for this opportunity. So, you know, I believe in D&I, my life journey, and especially in unconscious biases. So, yes, I'm very glad to go, you know, to join SAMBA, because SAMBA has an outreach, you know, if every single person within SAMBA is having this in mind and, you know, aiming to have D&I in our DNA, that each person can make the difference, because it's all our personal responsibility to first be aware, convinced, and then to spread the word. So really glad to have this opportunity to have events like this. So in between events, what do we do? So we also in the council together with Andrea to see what we would like to do in between. We can use our website, we can create chat, we can send articles, we can have different ways of reaching out to you. And so later on after the event, we'll ask you to fill in a little survey, 5 questions only, to ask how what topics will be interesting for you, and how you would like us to reach out to you. And also a call out to have any one of you to be willing to join our council. You don't need to have official experience that I don't have. It's just a passion. You need to be passionate, and we enjoy bringing this message and spreading the word. So yeah, without further ado, we invite our moderator, Anna, and the panel speakers. Take the chance to introduce Anna, who will then later introduce all of you. So Anna works at Catalyst, D&I expert, and a relationship manager at Catalyst, which allows her to reach out to global national successful organizations to help create workplaces that are diverse, inclusive, and flexible. Anna believes in personal development and providing the tools for people to drive this effort. And it has been a pleasure together with Anna and Andrea to design and develop this concept. So really, really glad to have our distinguished panel of speakers join us. So I hand over the session to Anna and enjoy.
Thank you. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're so happy to have you. And we chose this title today, Beyond Diversity, because we often talk about DEI. We mean diversity about that. And diversity is no longer something that's nice to have, but it's really expected by employees, leaders, shareholders, investors. And so what we really want to hone in on is the E&I part of DEI, the equity, the inclusion. The equity piece is made up of our policies and processes that help to inform the way that we work every day. But the inclusion piece is the one that we want to focus on really today, because it's something that you can do. It's a piece of it that you can contribute to. You can change the way that you work in your offices. You can make your colleagues feel more included. And I don't know about you, but I spend a large part of my time with my colleagues and in the workplace. And the way that I feel with them makes a big difference in how I'm going to contribute to the workplace. And at Catalyst, we've been around for 60 years doing research around the workplace, around promoting workplaces that work for women. And through one of our most recent studies, where we surveyed 6 employees across 6 countries, we found that innovation and inclusion are very linked. That employees reported that they were more innovative when they felt included at a 40% link. And in China and in Mexico, there's actually 78% and 51% respectively. There's also a greater sense of team citizenship, where employees were going above and beyond their roles and responsibilities. And these findings don't differ between men and women. So across genders, this is something that's super important as we create workplaces that work for everyone. And the good news is that there is something that we can actually do to become more inclusive leaders. With our teams and workplaces, we don't have to hold an influential position. At Catalyst, we say leaders from every seat, that you can lead from no matter where you are, no matter how flat the systems are, no matter how hierarchical it is, that you make a true difference in your workplace. And so how do we get there? We have our 5 fantastic panelists who can help us to kind of dig into this about how we can learn to develop our skills and gain experiences that will help us move and grow and continue to be competitive in the workplace, because these inclusive leadership skills are what's important. But we see it's important now and also as we move towards the future of work. So today we are joined by Gunter Dobrazu. He's leader and partner of PwC Switzerland and co-founder of Alexelis Capital AG, the first Swiss venture capital setup focusing on circular economy and innovation. And he will bring the perspective of innovation in business to our session today. We're also joined by Heidi Robertson, Group Head of Diversity and Inclusion at ABB, and she will be sharing her lessons learned from developing, launching, and running a DEI strategy in a global company with more than 105,000 employees in 100 countries across the world. We're joined also by Matthias Smoleni, head of the Center of Human Resources Management and Leadership at HWZ University of Applied Sciences, Zurich. and director at the international think tank Future of Work Forum London. In 2003, he was the EVP of Human Resources at Swiss Air when they found themselves in the middle of crisis. He has some insights on navigating through times of uncertainty and rapid change. We're also joined by Fatsi Wahande, Chief of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion section at the UNHCR. She is a multi-award-winning global diversity and inclusion strategist and social justice advocate with over 20 years of experience and expertise, specifically in DEI around the globe. Her inputs today will be invaluable. And last but not least, we have Dr. Katja Reitel, Group Head of Diversity, Inclusion and Wellbeing at Zurich Insurance. She focuses on guiding companies, really Zurich entities, and individuals with the human side of their business, which is increasingly important in the digital era. So without further ado, we can get into the questions. And for this one, we'll just go straight down. But Matthias, what are the 3 words you would use to describe the current landscape?
First one would be uncertainty, kind of driving in the fog with accelerated speed. Second one would be cooperation or agility cooperation. And the third one would be trust, because this is needed to overcome the others.
Yeah, that's a very good question and very difficult also to narrow it down to 3 words. But I would say hybrid, explorative, and human.
I would go with curiosity, challenging, and determined.
There's no way I'm going to do 3, but only taken, right? But I'm going to give you one that is really uncertainty in a positive way, right? Because we don't have a history that we can lean on in this one. So I think it's, if you're open and if you embrace the uncertainty, it's opening up new channels.
I would say the 3 words would be challenging, which already was mentioned, but also very exciting and very important.
Okay, so let's zero in on DEI. What are the leadership behaviors or skills that set people apart? And what have you seen? And Heidi, I'm going to start this one with you.
Yes, very good. And you referred to a lot of catalyst research, which we have also benefited massively from at ABB. We launched an unconscious bias training program for more than 10,000 employees and leaders. And here we are honing in on 3 key leadership traits, which we also have seen is really predicting inclusion. So it's the EACH model: empowerment, accountability, courage, and humility. And I think still very, very relevant is the humility piece, to be able to show vulnerability and to show that it's not, you don't have all the answers and it's okay to fail and fail forward. So I would really call out the humility and empowerment piece of driving inclusion forward as leadership traits.
Thank you. And Katja, I know that you have some experience with this too. What would you say?
Experience
with this too?
Yes. So yeah, as you mentioned, I think diversity, equity, inclusion, and then belonging, they really go hand in hand, right? So I think everyone knows how to focus on the numbers, how we can be more transparent, how we can foresee or estimate some numbers. But even if we are very diverse, there are 2 sides to diversity, right? And you need to manage it very well, because it can also go the other way. It's a double-edged sword. So inclusion is very, very important, because if we have diversity, but we don't have that inclusive culture, people will leave again, right? Or they don't join the company. So it's really important that we embed this inclusive culture. And then, yeah, use the tools. So as you also mentioned, unconscious bias training, you mentioned also, Anna, in the beginning, we do have all the policies. But again, we have the policies, but if we don't use them, right? If we don't have this culture, we can offer as many parental leave policies like we want if there is no culture to really use it, right? So I really think that's important to have commitment to whatever we come up with, to think, okay, this will help our diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
but also then to work together to be collaborative, to be aware of the differences, right? Help each other, build a safe environment so that everyone can speak up, bring their different views, bring their different opinions to the table, because that is really what diversity is also about, right? It's a source of different perspectives that we can be, as you mentioned, more innovative, have better solutions to problems, build trust, like it was mentioned also. So that is really key, right? To embed it in the whole employee life cycle, but also to our customers, whatever products you create or solutions, but also to build stakeholder trust. I think that's also important for companies. Yeah, for now.
Thank you. And Matthias, I'm interested to hear your opinion on this too, because you've seen how it can also transition in times of uncertainty as well.
Yeah, I think for me, let me tell you a short story from the Swiss military. I not served in the Swiss army, but in the German army. I was before. But I was invited by the head big chief of Swiss army to have a look at one of their exercises. And he wanted my opinion on the quality of their leadership training. And then we saw them in an very interesting exercise. And after this, the whole company, so they had to stand up and introduce themselves. So first the captain, and then all the soldiers. Each of them had to say his first name and what he was doing in his normal non-military life. So it was Paul, bookkeeper, Peter, the mechanic, and the biology student. So a huge diversity and also inclusion. You could see people in this group who would not have been chosen, but they have been placed in this group. And the leader, the officer, had to lead them. And they were doing this very successfully. And my question to the head of the Swiss army was, what do you do with these officers and sergeants? Because obviously they know how to do diversity, equity, inclusion. I can see it, I can feel it, I can hear it. But once they leave your barracks and come back to our companies, they forget this. And when they then, as managers, team leaders, are in a position to select people for their team, they look for similarities, not for inclusion, not for diversity. And how comes? And he said this was one of the smartest questions he was ever asked. I said, I'm extremely sorry, I can't give you an answer because I don't know. But this is a very interesting observation. So people are able to do it, but they are forced to do it because this is order by the chief. But once they leave and the other chief giving order, they just forget it. So that's why I keep on thinking about trust as something which should not be based on sympathy. Because this is not what can happen in military and also not in other teams and other things. So if people can select and choose other people to work in their teams, they tend to do this, base this on sympathy. I like this guy, so I take him to my team. And we have to overcome this and come back to something which the military in a completely different scope does also. So you have to work with this person. And if you don't like him or her, at least you have to get to know this person very well. Because knowing somebody very well can replace sympathy and affection. And we should not work, we should not wait until affection comes, sympathy and love. This can be replaced. And this is what we are looking into in our research at our university. How can we replace sympathy by getting to know other people much better in order to help this? So it was a little bit long.
Thank you for that story. Let's see. I saw that you maybe one had a reaction to with the conversation.
But so going back to your original question, which was around, I think some of the qualities and in leaders and in terms of that, I think the biggest challenge is the fact that diversity and inclusion are words that are used interchangeably. So we still find that even in describing it, we don't really have a clear definition of what they are. And I think it's important to start there. You know, what do we mean by diversity? And what do we mean by inclusion? And why is it that we're now moving away from diversity? Because when we understand that, we can then hone in on the qualities that will enable us to do that. And so I always start every meeting I have by giving an analogy of diversity and inclusion. And I use the analogy of baking a cake. So if you think about the ingredients that go into your cake, that's diversity. Diversity is the what and the who. So basically, everyone in this room, we could, drill it down to diversity. Inclusion is mixing. It's putting all those ingredients together. Inclusion is actually an action. It's something that we do. That's inclusion. It's not, what we have, it's what we do. And then the cake represents belonging. And I think for a lot of organizations, we've been so fixed on trying to get to diversity, but diversity is just the beginning of the journey. What we have to get to is a sense of belonging, because inclusion gets us to a sense of belonging. So if we're thinking about what are the leadership qualities that we should be looking for, well, we need to look for commitment. And not just commitment because there's a global crisis and people are talking about it, and then I have to say something, but commitment to the journey, because to get to inclusion and belonging is not an overnight thing. And a lot of our organizations are wanting us to have outcomes, but they're outcomes on diversity, not inclusion. Inclusion is about attitude and behavior, and that takes a long time to actually measure. So you need commitment. You need leaders that are committed from beginning to end, who are committed even when things are not going well, when they can't see the outcomes that they want. And they're also not afraid. I think we talked about courage to be able to say, we're actually not doing a good job. This is where we are. And I think that the leaders that I've seen that have done it well are leaders that already are value-led. So they are people who come into the space already with set values that they're able to articulate, and you buy into it. Because the reality is, let's be honest, when we think about our workplaces, when we think about leaving or how challenging they are, we're leaving people, we're not leaving our organizations. And so if we're thinking about what are the leadership qualities that leaders should have, we're basically not basing it on the company, we're basing it on the person who's leading us. So what are the qualities we want? We actually need people who are empathetic, because that's part of equity. So if you have no sympathy or empathy for people, how are you able to understand their situation? Now, am I saying that that should guide you? No, but I'm saying that you need to have a compassionate leader, somebody who understands and realizes that these experiences are not going to be the same for everybody else. And I think there's a level of curiosity that is required, because curiosity allows us to be, innovative as well. And being culturally intelligent, being able to lead across borders, being able to understand that I might be based in Switzerland, but the US, the UK, Africa is a different cultural context. And as a leader, am I able to adapt to that? So I think these are some of the qualities that I would say are needed to enable an environment where diversity and inclusion must thrive. And of course, the honesty and the humility goes with that. That's how I would answer that question.
Yes.
Maybe to go on from there, first of all, I have to say I'm very humbled today to be in this room, because all of you are specialists in that, and I'm not. Because when I went to university, I studied law. It's probably the last one where you would ever expect to learn anything about themes, right? And we're talking about leaders, right? So at some point you become a partner in this firm, and then you're expected to lead people. And when I did in year one, that was, well, tragic, looking back, because I had no idea of how to do that. When you look at PwC, I think we've got 69 or so nationalities just in this house working together and so forth, or even more, I don't know. It's a huge challenge, right? And I basically had to learn to be very humble and to be very grateful for the specialists we have in this house. And you have to accept that, yes, you're meant to lead, but you have to lead with a team. Because there's hardly any of those leaders out there who from their education currently have the knowledge. And I'm not saying that I'm a great leader, I'm just trying to survive somehow. But I think I'm doing a lot better than at the very beginning. I've learned a lot and I'm learning every day. That's humbleness and being very open and taking a step back and working with others. That's the magic.
But can I just jump in with one comment there? Because we talk about leaders and the responsibility of leaders and the role modeling of leaders and so on. But I think you really pointed out something super important in the introduction. And it's the fact that it takes all of us to succeed. It's our joint duty and really responsibility to be inclusive every day. And it's not the big actions of parental leave and sponsor programs, mentor programs. It's those small things of greeting that newcomer at the coffee machine, of inviting that colleague to the lunch table, to stopping someone who's interrupting the meeting and saying, what do you think? Because you don't speak up. So I think, yes, leaders have an extremely important role in role modeling and taking this forward. And we talk about the leadership traits that predict inclusion. But at the end of the day, it takes all of us to succeed, and we all need to take that responsibility to drive inclusion forward.
Thank you for that. And sometimes it can feel like solving the problems of environment, right? Where it feels like such a huge task at hand, where we don't even know where we can start as an individual to play a role. But it's in those small actions, it's in becoming more empathetic and breaking down this big umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion into those smaller, bite-sized pieces that feel like, yes, that is something that I can learn to do. Yeah, thank you. So moving into the next question, let's talk about connection, trust, team building, especially on dispersed teams. Gunther, we'll start with you. What have you seen? What have you done? And what have you seen work?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I took over, I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was, 8 years or so ago, we tried to bring the teams together because PwC Legal has the classical part, and then we have the regulatory part, and then we have new businesses which we've built up over time, which is FLR and so forth, flexible legal resources. And the diversity of people in there is just quite stunning, right? Especially when you're meant to lead and so forth. So we've done quite a bit, and we tried to create teams and so forth. And then COVID happened, right? And it all broke down again. So people were working from home. They were still bringing their best to the table, but they didn't meet anymore. So when people are not rubbing elbows, the team spirit goes away. And I don't think that we've been able to really overcome that, but we try to do it with more meetings and online and so forth. And now that hopefully we are past COVID, that we're back in the office, we're seeing it being a problem again, because people are maybe 2 days in the office, maybe 3 days if they're lucky. So how do you create the teams? Because at some point people are working here, but it doesn't mean so much anymore because you don't really feel that. So that is the biggest challenge I'm working on right now, to get them to meet again. Even if it's a little things, to have the coffee and to have the discussion and so forth. Because being on a computer is a whole different thing than being in a room where you really feel the other person. So I think that's what we've learned. We've come a pretty good way, I would say. Then it all broke down, and we kind of managed to come back, and hopefully we'll find a way to get back to the old kind of normal situation.
And Patsy, in your experience, what have you seen really work when it comes to building this trust, empathy, connection in teams?
I think, going back to obviously new ways of working, and, after COVID, a lot of people are working from home. And I've often wondered whether our reluctance to, when we talk about how can we have greater connection, is it because we've just been so used to people being in the office and we just assume that if there's no connection? Like, this is a question I ask myself, because for our team, we do have, some people who work at home different days, but we have one day that we're all in the office. so that we can have that. But we also, make sure that at every stage, I think as a leader, it's about knowing where your people are at and making sure there's the regular communication. Obviously, it becomes more challenging if you've got a geographically dispersed team, and then you have to consider time zones. And so in my previous role, I think what helped was for people who are not in this time zone to also feel like we're making an effort to have meetings during their time zone. So, things like that, I feel can help people feel a sense of connection. But I do think that it's just a new way of working now. And we might never go back to this whole everybody's in the office Monday to Friday, because the world has changed. And so I feel like I also have to now adapt and unlearn some things, and be okay to say, we might not have that connection that we're used to. How can we build this connection there? And I think it's about talking to people, asking them what they need, because at the end of the day, when we talk about connection and trust, I feel like what my team want from me is for me to show them that I understand whatever it is they're going through. So if they've got tight deadlines, or if they're not feeling well and they had promised to do this, if they're able to at least approach me and say, I can't come into the office today. I know I said I was going to. Do you mind if I do this? Or, I switch off my computer, I'm going off. And, Julianne, my colleague, who's part of my team, is very good at that. When she's working sort of late or she feels there's a tight deadline, she'll be like, I'm really tired now. Is it okay if I just take a break and, work on it tomorrow? And, she might not be in the office, but I feel like those kind of things help build that trust, because what I would hate and what I want, even from my leader, is for them to put trust in me that I'm able to do the job. And I feel like a lot of the times when we micromanage or we're wanting to know what everyone is doing, that breaks down trust, because what you're saying, what you're communicating is, I really don't believe that you're capable, or I don't trust you enough. And I think that when we think about people working from home, there's also that trust element to say, you know what, I have to trust that you are going to do the work that you said you're going to do. And I have to show that. And the way I show it is not by, asking questions or interrogating. So I think there's things like that where, schedule regular meetings when you have a hybrid kind of team. Make sure, if you can, if at least you're in the same place, to have one day where probably everybody comes into the office. And if you have a geographically dispersed team, also really consider the time zones. One thing that has helped me in the past is I've also given an opportunity for different people to chair the meeting, so that they also feel there's a trust. So it's not always on me, but I might have somebody do a presentation, or we might start with a gratitude 5 minutes, like, what are you grateful for? What is working well? Any good news to share? Things like that, I feel like can help build a team without necessarily doing, like you're saying, sometimes it's those small things that help. These are just some of the things that I've done in the past that I think could work.
Thank you for those practical examples. And I'm really hearing that flexibility and trust is integral as we're starting to build up this within the teams. And Katja, I saw you nodding your head on this.
Yeah, I could
Yes.
echo what you're saying, and I really think, hybrid is here to stay, right? And it means different things to people. So we need to try to come together and make it work for everyone. But I think a challenge, and what I also hear from leaders or from teams, is what do you do with new joiners, right? They don't feel the purpose of the company, they don't feel included, and they cannot learn from us. For example, when you sit next to each other, right, and explain a task. So how do we do that best, right? Do we make boot camps for 1-2 weeks when they join? So that is still a challenge, I think. And we also don't have all the answers. So we're also exploring, what does hybrid mean for us as a company? What does it mean for teams, for individuals, but also then for new joiners? So how can we really make that work, that they feel they're part of that team, of that company, they feel the purpose, they feel that spirit, right, to be.
Yeah.
So I think that's challenging.
You just reminded me of something, like when I first moved to Switzerland 2 years ago, it was during COVID. When I got the job, I was working at the UN Human Rights Office, and there was no one in the office. So I came at that time when people were working from home, except like my manager and stuff. So for about 6 months, it was just me and 1 or 2 people, because people were actually told you can't come into the office. And it was really, really like, I don't even know who my colleagues are. But you know what made the difference was I had a few colleagues who would just invite me, like, do you know where you can buy groceries, or this is a, so it was actually not what the organization was doing. It was the people in the organization that actually made me feel more at home. But I just thought about that when you said COVID, because I was like, yeah, that was me for 6 months. Yeah.
And also we used to have, like you explained, like meetings where everyone comes in like once a year or every second year, so that people can meet, right? Because we're in different locations. But now we also have the challenge of the emissions, right? So how do we do that, right? We don't want to travel too much, don't want to bring in the people too often, and because we also want to do something good for the environment, contribute. So there are new challenges coming where we need to adapt and find solutions. Yeah.
Especially as we come out of COVID and this is staying, how do we navigate it when there isn't a crisis that's happening on the side of it all? Yeah.
Next will come.
Next will come.
Next crisis is around the corner.
Yes, it could. Heidi, is there anything that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, maybe just the notion of trust. I think that's critical in any relation. So it's not like, okay, unique for this topic. I mean, if you don't trust your friends, your parents, your child, your colleague, I think trust is the key in any relation. But seeing it in the context of inclusive leadership, linking it back to what I mentioned initially on the empowerment. If I'm to empower my people, I need to trust, and they need to trust me. I think that it's really linking back to the each model, the leadership traits that predicts inclusion, and of course also to the accountability. So I am accountable to deliver, and I'm also empowered to deliver, and hence I need to have that trust relationship with my leader. So I think that's it's a very interesting concept, and it really research that has been made.
Thank you. And Matthias, you actually inspired this question from our conversations, because you were talking so passionately about how it goes even beyond gender partnership, it goes beyond inclusion, but there is this extra piece of connectivity, empathy. So I wanted to see what your reaction is to the rest of the panel. This one.
I have never met somebody at the coffee machine asking me, your microphone is on mute or your camera is off. But this happens in virtual meetings. So instead of the high quality small talks at the coffee machine, we talk about the microphone and the cameras. This is not a replacement. So we need to invest more time in this. So what we figured out is that the duration, the length of meetings has decreased during the crisis, during the COVID. But the number of meetings has increased. So we spend more time in meetings than before, which is not good. Because we do a meeting for almost anything. So we should sounds crazy, but we should minimize or at least decrease the number of meetings. But the meetings we do, we should spend more time on quality of social connection in those meetings. And what I do, and this is a recommendation, not just an idea, in terms of inclusion, not every day, but once or twice, 3 times a week. Under the shower in the morning, I think about a number between 1 and 10. Maybe this morning it was 5. That means when I enter our university or wherever I do my business, I start to count. And the 5th person I meet, no matter who it is, be it a student, be it a professor, colleague, or the dean, or the cleaner, the 5th person, I ask, how are you doing today? Really? And then I show empathy that I now have time to listen. And in many occasions, they say, That's
Who are
weird.
you?
Who are you? It's weird. But in many, I would say in the majority of cases, I have interesting discussions. They're on 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I don't care. But this gives quality because then I find much more out about these persons, get to know them much better. And since this is kind of the random select thing, so I don't ask the people who I know will answer positively. Oh, I'm so great. So maybe someone said, I'm extremely sad today. And then we talk. Of course, you can cheat. You know? See the fifth person. Oh, I thought the sixth. But you should. So if you don't cheat, and I know somebody who learned it also from me and said, hey, this is really great. He does it, he said the grown-up way. He starts to count when he leaves his apartment in the morning. So that means at the bus station, if the seventh person is at the bus station, he asks him, how are you doing today? Really? He said he gives pretty much negative feedback. Are you completely crazy? You know, it's 6 o'clock in the morning asking these shitty questions. They said it happens, not very often, but it happens from time to time that he comes too late to the office because I met somebody would I have never met without this idea, and was a wonderful conversation. Just an idea for inclusion, active doing.
And Fatsi, it looked like you were thinking about this.
Oh no, I think every opportunity I have to be with remarkable people like I am on the panel, I always take notes. I think that's part of, yeah, I'm always learning. So I'm just taking notes down. Yeah.
A little bit of learning from me, and again thinking about the leadership question, whatever that means, right? But I remember when I joined PwC, I was interviewed. The interview was prepared questions, right? I don't know whether any of you have done them. And I would say like 5 years ago it started, and 3 years ago those failed totally. So I went in there and I had like 18 questions or whatever prepared that I was meant to ask people. And usually on question 2, this was over, especially with the Gen Z and so forth. So they were like, yeah, whatever, but can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah, sure. So what is the purpose of that company? When I was asked for the first time, that was like, oh, wow, I know we have a really great purpose, but I can't remember it right now. Then I had to go back and I had to research it. And then they were talking about things that were really important to them, which is something that I would never have dared to do back
But
then.
the right answer would be sign a contract, you're in 5 months.
Exploring.
The problem is you don't get to sign the contract. So back then, when we put a job out, we had like 50 or so people applying. Today, we probably get 10, and we have to find that one that really fits us. And to win them, you have to explain to them things that you have never thought about. Right? So it also means that we permanently have to reinvent. We have to kind of learn how those people are thinking. And those people then hopefully become part of our team. And right now, I would say we have 4 generations in our team. And that is what really drives the team. This is where you get the new ideas, right? It's not just from the same old people with the gray hair. I mean, they're very important, don't get me wrong, but it's the combination there. But you need to rethink everything.
But then we're straight back to what you said also around being able to have a certain cultural sensitivity and understanding also how to act and collaborate with people that are different from you. And to also adapt according to situations, generations, et cetera, et cetera. I think that is extremely important and a very important trait for all of us to learn and continue to explore.
Are there any other learnings from the panel that you would like to share? I think this is very insightful what you are all sharing.
I've actually forgotten what the question was.
Now it's a different question completely because, yeah, the original question was connection, trust, team building on dispersed teams, and what have you done, what works, but it's kind of transforming into something else here.
I think for me, when I think about trust, one of the areas that's obviously becoming really popular in DEI is the whole concept of psychological safety. And I think that for me, linking trust to, is this organization inclusive, and does it afford colleagues a sense of psychological safety? Are they able to speak up? Are they able to provide real feedback without this fear of being victimized, being sidelined as well? And I think that's a real challenge, to be quite honest, this whole concept of psychological safety. And a lot of the feedback that I get is around the fact that people are so scared to speak up. And so for me, that's a sign that there's just no trust. There's no trust in the fact that if I share the feedback, that people will take it and I'm not going to be victimized. So I think that, this is something that's becoming a real issue. And if we link it to people's sense of health and well-being, you can see where that link is and how important trust in an organization is, because the impact of a lack of safety, a lack of trust, a lack of psychological safety has implications that impact on the business in so many ways. And so I think part of creating an inclusive workplace for me is about understanding how can we create a sense of safety and how can we build trust. And so, for example, after George Floyd, and we all experienced this whole global crisis around race, people felt comfortable enough to talk about it because there was a global movement. My question was, did it have to take the murder of George Floyd for us to understand that racism is within our organizations? Do people have to die for us to actually have those conversations? And so I guess the question that I would pose and I'm reflecting on is, what would represent another George Floyd? We all know that our world changes, but how can we prevent things like that by ensuring that our workplaces are a place of trust? And I think that's the question we each have to ask ourselves, is like, are we actually creating an environment where people can speak up? But it's not even about speaking up about things that are wrong. It's giving people an opportunity to speak up about things that they want to talk about, right? So, part of inclusion for me is being mindful that even though we represent so many different focus areas, I am not equipped to speak on behalf of somebody, or a particular group. I don't have a disability, so I can't speak on their behalf, but I can certainly create a platform for them to be able to have those discussions. So I think that, to me, is also how we can bring trust and create psychological safety, is for all of us. And I like, what you said, inclusion is a personal responsibility. And so what can we do to create spaces where we're having meaningful conversations that impact on people? And as a leader, or as somebody who's part of a privileged group, because I'm a dominant group, how am I using my privilege for good? Because if I know how I'm using my privilege for good, that also is a way that we create a sense of trust and safety.
And it's also, what are the consequences, right? If you have a different view and you speak up. So, and that's not only an organization, it's a whole society, right? You criticize, you challenge. Is that always good? Right? Is that always what we are supporting? So it's hard, right? But I totally agree on what you're saying. And also you, Heidi, before, because diversity has two sides, right? It can lead to interpersonal tensions, like different generations. So how do we manage that, right? To really get the best performance out of teams, to be innovative and all those benefits which inclusion and diversity brings, right? So how do we do that in a really good way?
And maybe just one sentence on what you just said. With privilege comes responsibility. And I think that's something we really need to take seriously. With privilege comes responsibility. And that's increasing, importance for us to understand and to own. But maybe just from very serious to a little bit more of what we're seeing in ABB on elements to ensure inclusion and trust across 100 countries, time zones, and so on. Because of course we cannot fly everyone across the globe to meet and to interact and so on. But we have employee resource groups who have come up with amazing initiatives scavenger hunt, and I was with a microphone running around, and then you have to pick up something yellow, and you're running in your living room and finding it. And we are like 100 people in the virtual room, but we are doing a lot of fun things, or they are organizing fun things that I never even thought of, and that's creating a lot of fun and connection, and also sense of belonging. So we're coming together with employee-driven activities, with new ways of doing things that for sure I would never be innovative enough to come up with, but also empowering our people to tell us what to do. And by then we see a lot of fun things, I would say, which is not necessarily to be in the office, in next to each other, which is of course also something we missed in this hybrid model. But there are good elements to also bridge that missing piece of physical presence.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came up when we were all meeting was that before this panel was that it looks different for every organization. It looks different for every team, what it is that you're going to do to build that connection and trust. And having this idea of something that's fun, right? We miss out on that when we're not in the office because we're not just joking around, or something funny can't just happen spontaneously. And so we lose that, but we can recreate that with a little bit of effort in a hybrid or even completely virtual model. And on the point of privilege, there is something that's often said, that privilege is invisible to those who have it. And so when you're thinking about what is my privilege, one of the best ways to figure it out is to go and talk to other people and get to know yourself, doing a little bit of an inventory of the things that you don't have to worry about in your day-to-day, that you don't have to even think twice about when you're going out for a job or for a promotion. So I think this privilege piece is very important as we consider how can we ensure that we're being more inclusive as leaders. So I we're really good on time, and so you don't have to keep it short, but we can start from this side and move our way down closer. If there's one thing you would like today's audience to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
I think we have talked about many things, right? And also in the beginning, you asked us for the 3 words, so it's challenging. I think that echoes what we have heard, but it also gives a lot of opportunity. And I like what Heidi said, it really takes everyone, right? So like you mentioned, we also have the employee resource groups. We're trying to have D&I councils in every region and so on. So we have many initiatives, but it really takes everyone, right? It's a partnership with the company, with the team. So together we can achieve much more and can be more aware of biases or challenges to understand each other and really shape this topic together. I think that is really important.
I think, yes, the challenges are huge, but on the other hand, we're having discussions we didn't have 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 60 years ago. So the bottom line for me is it's amazing times. And as much time as we're spending, it's worth to do it because the tomorrow will be better.
Maybe one thing to add here, because I did my PhD actually on diversity management, and that was 15 years ago. And thinking back now it's like in every company, right? It's a topic, it's very important. And when I did the research on psychological safety, right, it was really like driven down to research, right? It was not in the work environment, in the culture. So now I think, yes, you're right. We are really talking about it. It's a great momentum we can use, and people really like to drive this topic. I would agree on that.
I like to think of ourselves like we are stories. Our world is made up of stories. PwC has a story. This event is a story in itself. And so if we think about ourselves as stories and we're all part of this bigger story, what I'd like to leave with you is, what stories are you listening to? Because the stories you listen to will determine the stories you tell. In other words, how inclusive is your story source? Because if it's not inclusive, you're always going to tell a single narrative story. And so if we really want to be inclusive, then we also have to make sure that we're listening to different stories, different perspectives, because that forms who we are. And I think if each of us can, take inclusion as a personal responsibility, it starts with the action, because inclusion is an action. And so I will finish by posing the question to say, what actions are you taking to make your environment more inclusive?
Yes, and I think I just want to echo that. I always anything of the work stops we are running as ABB and externally also to say, what's your commitment? Because it takes all of us to succeed. So I can put targets on the leaders, and we can put programs in place, and we can do a lot. But what can each and every one of you take as a commitment to drive inclusion forward within your perimeter of responsibility? Because collectively, that's when we make magic. So if there's one thing I would like you to leave the room with, it's the thought of what you can do more, or even add on to what you're already doing to make a difference and to utilize your privilege.
What came to my mind when listening to the discussion so far was, since I'm in HR since many years, and we do have the problem since many years that we think the others, so the CEOs and whatever they are, they don't understand HR. Because, and then it's easy to figure out why. They speak a different language. And we kept on waiting for years that they start to understand our language in HR. But since a couple of years, I'm convinced we have to turn this around. So we have to learn the language of economics to speak to them who have the decision-making power, to speak to them in their language. And this is something where DeepL doesn't help. So that's why I encourage my students at our university, when they go for a master in HR leadership, that they do half a year a language course. So I call it a CAS in general management. It's a short version of an MBA, the short version, bonsai MBA. But I would call it a language course. After half a year, you should be in a position to phrase your ideas, your thoughts, your actions in a language they understand, and that helps really. Now, when just another short story, when I worked as an HR director in a large company here in Switzerland many years ago. And so we were 3 in the top executive management, 8,000 employees, 3 in the top executive management, the CEO, CFO, and myself. And the CFO always thought, this is a mistake. The CEO and myself, that's enough. The HR guy, we don't need. And I can tolerate this for a while. And then I asked him, what is the value of our company? And then he asked me, what value do you mean? Say, in economics. And I gave him a very short lecture on economics and explained him what I wanted to know. And then he said, 1.2 billion Swiss francs. So, well, this is interesting. If I count the number of shares and multiply them with the value of the shares of today, then I come to 3 billion Swiss francs. So either the shareholders are idiots, they pay much more than the company has a value, or they think about something else. So future growth values, I explained him briefly about future growth. He was extremely astonished that the HR guy knows what he's talking about. And I said, this is easy. If the company has a value of 3 billion and you can explain 1.2, then the other 1.8 must be mine. Because